Welcome everyone to our webinar on what works in prospecting. And we are going to share with you today research-backed strategies to fill your sales funnel. And as we are waiting for folks to join, we have a lot of people registered for this webinar today. So as we're waiting for folks to join, just want to cover off a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, the webinar will be recorded and the link will be shared later today in an email, along with a special bonus of our prospecting white paper sharing all of our research. So be sure to look for that. Also, we do have some time set aside at the end of the webinar for Q&A, but we'd love to hear from you during the session. Please feel free to chat us. Any questions, any comments, suggestions, we would love to interact with you and add those questions in as well. You can use the chat feature or the Q&A function, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of information to share with you today. This is quite a hot topic. It has to be one of the biggest challenges that we hear about from sales leaders, from sales teams, and it really is one of the most critical steps in the sales process. That's prospecting. The better job we do of filling our funnels on the front end of the process with qualified leads, the better off we are in hitting our closing goals, our revenue targets. So our founder, in fact, Bill Brooks, used to say that the secret of selling is in the accurate and consistent science of prospecting. We truly believe in that, and we are excited to share some strategies to help in your overall consistency and accuracy in prospecting. I am so excited to introduce Shelly Burkhart as our guest today. Shelly is a director of sales effectiveness for the Brooks Group, and she shares her expertise gained from a career in media sales and sales management, more than 25 years. She's worked with B2B clients in a variety of industries in both her sales career and also as a facilitator, a coach, and a consultant for the Brooks Group. I've seen her in action. I know that this is a topic she's extremely passionate about, so welcome, Shelly.
Thank you, Michelle. Happy Friday, everyone. Yes, I'm passionate about this prospecting and filling your funnel. It's so important.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that. So let's talk about and share with you really quickly kind of the key topics that we are going to share. So we are going to share some research with you from our prospecting surveys, and then we're going to talk about how buyers and sellers find each other and messages that generate meetings and when buyers are most likely to speak with a seller. So 3 key things. We have a lot of data. Can't get to all of it in this session, so again, I encourage you to check out our prospecting white paper when it comes your way later today. And let's take a quick look at our prospecting research before we get into those strategies, so you know kind of what we are basing our data on. We surveyed 137 B2B sellers, 199 B2B buyers, and this represents more than 19 industries. Now, those B2B sellers represent outside or field sales, account management, account development, inside sales, sales development, business development representatives, and sales leaders. And then our B2B buyers also represent owners, presidents, CEOs, VPs, senior vice presidents, as well as managers and director level and individual contributors. So we are bringing you a variety of roles represented and a variety of perspectives. So a couple of other little tidbits about our B2B sellers. They average 56% of self-gen opportunities. So in other words, 56% of their overall opportunities are self-generated. They are doing the prospecting. And overall, they are averaging about 19 hours per week allocated to prospecting. Shelly, what do you think about that number?
You know, when early in my sales career, I remember having a conversation with my sales manager. He said, "You need to prospect more." And I was like, "I don't have time to prospect. I've got accounts I'm servicing." it's too much. And he said to me, it's not about time management, it's about priority management. And in the business I was in, new business was key. Our commission structure was based off a new business. And so I changed my thinking and I thought, well, if this is what I need to do to get new business as a prospect, and I need to make sure I allocate that time. So it makes sense. If half my work week is based on prospecting, that's what I needed to do to hit that new business goal.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know you and I had been talking about 19 seems high, but to your point, if you spend your time, if you invest your time in those activities, especially if you're incentivized on new business development or prospecting, then, obviously your outcomes are going to be better. And I also wanted to point out, that's an average. So we saw responses of anywhere from an hour a week prospecting, which is probably too low, to 40 hours a week prospecting. So that's somebody that's all they're doing. So understand that that's kind of where that number came from.
Sure.
All right, so let's take a look at how buyers and sellers find each other. So first data point, and then we're going to share some strategies as to what this data actually means for those of you out there listening to us, watching us, having to do this prospecting yourself. So where do buyers and sellers find each other? So for buyers, their top 5 strategies or top 5 resources for finding potential vendors: online search, referrals from colleagues, seller email outreach, seller phone outreach, and networking events. So those are the top 5 ways that buyers are finding you all out there watching us today. And not really surprising that online search is number 1. We know that that is becoming more and more common. Yeah. Now, how do sellers find buyers? Top 5. Customer referrals are number 1. Existing CRM contacts, LinkedIn, industry association membership lists, and non-competing vendor referrals. So what I'm seeing here, Shelley, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit as well, is the presence of referrals. And that's going to be a theme throughout our conversation today. But buyers are relying on referrals, and sellers are finding referrals as well. So that's going to be a really valuable way for folks to source each other.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that during the impact process when I'm facilitating, about referrals and asking for those referrals.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it, there's some ramifications there too in terms of really what buyers are looking for is based on trust, right? They're looking for sources and ways to vet sellers with a degree of trust and credibility.
Absolutely.
So be aware of that. Yeah. So let's talk about how to meet prospects where they are. So thinking about this data we just looked at, let's look at a few of these strategies. And Shelley, you're going to walk us through these.
Yeah. You're going to ensure that quality digital content is across the journey within the decision, right? So we want to make sure that anything we put out there is quality content.
Absolutely.
And then it's so important to work your referrals and common connections. You'd be surprised on how many sellers do not ask for referrals, and it just makes sense. If you're working with someone that's already a customer and they love doing business with you, why wouldn't they recommend someone else to you? And then participate in industry events. This is key. We're salespeople, and a lot of us love this type of thing. We love networking events, and so this is where you can really make personal connections with folks when you're doing these industry events.
Yeah, and I think industry events are starting to come back. Obviously, things kind of died down with COVID, but they're starting to come back, and there are more opportunities for it. And again, it's that idea of making a connection, like you've said.
And then your LinkedIn profile, that's such a powerful tool. There's so much information out there on LinkedIn, and I just think it's a touch of a button, and you're able to connect with people and pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I would also add, take a look at your LinkedIn profile. Make sure that it conveys you as a seller, or sales managers kind of look at your teams. make sure that they are inspiring trust, they're conveying credibility, and it's not just a digital resume. It really is an
Right.
opportunity to convey a message, and I think that's where the value of it is.
And then incorporate consistent email and phone outreach. And we talk a lot about consistency with an impact process, and this is positioning yourself, if you will. So if you're consistent with emailing your clients and making sure that you're touching them, and you're doing this when you're prospecting, you're going to be well positioned before that trigger point, before they actually want to buy. And that's really where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Shelley, you and I have talked also about personalization in those emails, incorporating people's names, use information that you know. Video can be a great resource
Right?
to,
Soapbox, right?
yes, Soapbox, Vidyard, those types of tools add interest to an email because we all know, especially emails, it can be hard to make your email stand out.
Right.
And yeah,
We want to make sure that whatever we email, whatever is in that subject line, is relevant to the prospect. That it's important to them, not necessarily what's important to us, but what's important to the prospect.
exactly, exactly. And again, I think there's some opportunities for sellers to use some of these tools a little more. We did survey or ask in our research in our survey, how frequently or to what extent our sellers used tools like video and that sort of thing, and only 5% are using it consistently. So again, I think there's an opportunity there. I think also improving or not giving up too quickly in your email and phone cadence, or your email, phone, LinkedIn, etc. Stick with it.
Right. I know there's some research out there that talks about the touch points and how sellers sometimes they give up after 6 or 7 times, and that's not when you want to give up. That's when you're just getting started.
Exactly, exactly. Our research shows that the average seller gives up after 5 connection attempts. So
Yeah.
you may be missing out on opportunities, especially if you don't have that name recognition and that sort of thing. All right, let's take a look at what messages generate meetings. So we've talked about where buyers and sellers find each other, but what are those messages that generate meetings? And there's some surprising data in here, at least it was for me when I saw it. So our buyer respondents, so if you're thinking about your messages and what to put in there, number 1 was a product demo. Number 2 was brand recognition. Number 3 was a referral or common connection. Number 4 was sharing content that's related to your prospect's business. So not necessarily product information, but information that's of value to your prospect about their business. And an invitation to an event is number 5, like a webinar or a lunch and learn or something like that, right? Just like we're doing here. So those are the top 5. Now, we also segmented that data by what we call senior level buyers. These are our presidents, our owners, our CEOs, general managers, senior vice presidents, vice presidents. So many sellers, many salespeople, sales teams need to target that senior level decision maker. So this is what their preferences are. Number 1, share content. Again, content related to their business. Number 2, that referral and common connection is coming up again. Number 3 is the product demo. Number 4 is brand recognition. So do they recognize your company name or your name? And number 5 is that invitation to an event. Now, I do want to add a caveat here with the product demo information because, again, that was kind of surprising. As sales trainers, we often teach do not lead with the demo.
Right.
And so this is dependent on the buyer having a self-identified need, having potentially started a formal search for a solution, or have set a budget. So we did ask some questions about that. And so when we filter that out, things like ROI statements, right? Being able to talk about the return on your offering become more important. Case studies become more important. The referrals, the the brand recognition and that kind of thing become much more important. So that's an important caveat. We address that in the white paper. But again, things to think about when you are messaging for your buyers, all buyers, and then especially your senior level buyers. So strategies now understanding the messaging and the preferences of buyers, we're going to talk about how to use messaging that appeals to prospects.
Right. And this is huge because many times we have the tendency just to talk about us. Right. When we're messaging, but it's not about us. We've got to establish credibility, trust, and offer value with every touch point that we deliver when we're prospecting.
Absolutely.
And then, tailor the message to the buyer roles. We talk a lot about that within the impact process, the way we speak to different level of decision makers. So we want to make sure we're tailoring that message for that role.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just saw the ranking was a little bit different. I mean, there were some similar components on each list, but all buyers, which includes individual contributors, managers, and directors, the entire group, versus the senior level buyers, there is a difference. And so, to your point, tailoring those messages, being aware of who you're talking to.
Right.
Here it is again.
It's always there, using their referrals. It just makes sense, right? You've got a great relationship with a customer. They love doing business with you. Find out if there's other people they know that you can help, that you can solve for.
Yeah, I was talking with a client yesterday, in fact, an organization that we're working with, and talking to one of their top performing sellers about how she generates leads and business. And we asked her about referrals, and she says, I get a couple, I probably get 2 or 3 a month, but I don't ask for them. And she's like, I don't feel comfortable asking for them.
It's crazy. It's crazy that we don't, because we ask for everything else all day long.
Right.
For a referral.
Absolutely. If you have a satisfied customer, then for goodness sakes, ask for that referral. And then avoid sending that basic product or service information.
Yeah, because we tend to do that as sellers because we think it's all about us, but it's really not. It's most likely irrelevant to the customer unless we again tailor it to their needs and their wants.
Right. And this one was actually sending basic product or service information was the lowest ranking messaging on both groups. So just sending that information over and hoping it lands is not an effective strategy. You're looking to really, again, establish that trust and the credibility for somebody to meet with you, or offer some level of value to them that they can see, beyond your product or service.
Right.
All right, so when are buyers most likely to speak with a seller? This is, again, we're going to look at all buyers and then those senior decision makers. They have a self-identified need. So they've already come to the conclusion that they need to buy something. And again, going back, how they find vendors, they've probably done a lot of online research as well. Number 2, they were referred by a trusted source. Number 3, they have previous experience with the seller or the seller's organization. Number 4, they've budgeted for the purchase. And number 5, they've started a formal search so we had 2 that were tied for the same percentage. They engaged with a seller at an industry event. And so that's kind of going back to, do they have a need, and they've started a search and they've budgeted. So in those cases, you have somebody that is already partly the way down their buying process. Now with senior level buyers, again, those presidents, CEOs, senior vice presidents, etc., previous experience with a seller or the seller's organization is number one. So they're looking to do business with somebody maybe they're familiar with. Number two, they've started that formal product search. Number three, budgeted for the purchase. Four, self-identified need, and then referred by a trusted source. So again, we're seeing either they've got that need, or there's some level of trust and credibility there from a buyer, from the buyer to the seller. And that's so important in terms of being able to warm up that messaging.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's take a look at these strategies to improve your prospecting odds. Shelley, tell us about this.
So identify and monitor trigger events. We talked about this earlier. We want to make sure we're already positioning ourselves as sellers before that trigger event happens, right? So they know who we are because we've been emailing them, we've been calling them before they're ready to pull the trigger on making a purchase or start the process of investigating.
Yes, absolutely. And we also mentioned on the previous data, sellers are more likely, or buyers are more likely to meet with you when they know you have a need, or when they know they have a need and they know they have a budget. And so as sellers, think about what in your industry would indicate someone is likely to buy or likely to be in the market for your product or service. And that's, those are those trigger events. Is it that they've changed jobs, they're in a new role, and maybe they're ripe for your offering?
Right.
Maybe they've applied for a new business license. Shelley, you talked about, you and I have talked about
journal. Yes, I loved it when they would put the new business listings, and I knew, okay, they're going to be opening shop soon. I'd start to message to them. And I even remember one time when I met a commercial real estate agent, and he would share with me businesses that were about to purchase a place where I was able to say, okay, well, I know they're going to open soon. So I would start messaging to them pretty quickly.
Right. That kind of hits two areas, right? You got a trigger event of a business license, and then you've also got referrals from non-competing vendors. So
right.
It's a double win there. So those are the types of things to really be thinking about in terms of where to focus your efforts.
And then mine referrals and common contacts, that it's the low-hanging fruit, right? They're there, we know them. Why not ask? And LinkedIn is a great source to see who else they're connected with, where you can actually message them directly and tell them who you are and who you have a commonality with.
Right. And we just mentioned too the non-competing vendors. So those are common contacts as well. Share referrals, share contacts, and work with each other in that way. Because again, anytime you've got that name reference, that referral reference, that just opens the door a little bit wider for you as a seller.
Right.
Yeah.
And reconnecting with past customers. We talked about this earlier. Businesses change, decision makers change, the environment of their business change. So reconnecting with past customers is key, because finding out what their needs and wants are, you could determine that that's someone you could put in your pipeline and put in your funnel that you hadn't thought about.
Absolutely.
And then keeping up with contacts who change companies. And I'll go back to LinkedIn again, because that's a great way to figure that out. We see that all the time, that they started a new position and that bubbles up on LinkedIn. So you're able to connect with them again and find out what their needs and wants are within this new company they're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just saw in the data that buyers are saying previous experience with a seller or the organization is important to them. So if you have contacts, or if you're new in your role and your organization has a CRM database, that kind of thing, use that information, because again, that's giving you that point of reference. So if you think about it, if you have your messaging in place, right? So your messaging, that's maybe your referrals, your brand recognition, information content that will help your buyer, and you're monitoring things like trigger events, and you're working your referrals, and you're reconnecting with past customers, and you're doing it with a consistent cadence, right? We talked about email and phone and LinkedIn. All of these things together will help you improve your odds for, making contact, for getting those appointments, for getting those folks in through your funnel.
Absolutely.
All right. And so those are the main strategies that we're going to share today. I want to remind you all that we do have that prospecting white paper that's coming out this afternoon. Anybody on this webinar will have an exclusive first look at the white paper. So it is not being released to the general public until the middle of next week. So you all are going to get a head start. And we do cover these types of tips. We also cover things like optimum sequence and how many outreaches is most effective and that kind of thing. There's some bonus content for sales leaders in there as well. So we hope that you will take a look at that and read through it and hopefully find some best practices. We're going to go through the best practices here of our webinar of what we've presented today. I would encourage you all to please send us your questions. We've gotten a few chats. Thank you so much for those, but we look forward to hearing any questions or other thoughts that you have. So let's review those best practices. Shelley, you want to take the first one?
Work those referrals, common contacts, past customers. You've most likely done great business with them. They're probably raving fans of yours. So why not connect with them? I feel like that's the easiest way to go.
Right. It's the low-hanging fruit. And I feel like we've been beating that drum all the way through this session. But it really is so, so important. Work those referrals, especially for those of you who have been in your roles for a long time. You've got an established customer base. Work those referrals. Like, work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Or harder and smarter.
Right.
All right. And there we go.
And then we want to make sure that those messages we send out establishes credibility and offers value. It's got to be important to the end user. It's got to be important to that prospect. So just keep that in mind when you're sending those messages out. Is it going to be important to your prospect? And that way that they're going to respond if it's important to them or not.
Yes, yes.
And then just making sure the quality of that digital content is strong. Your LinkedIn profile, again, it's not a resume. You got to have your LinkedIn profile speak about what you do for your customers and how much they love working with you.
Yes. And we understand as well that the digital content, a lot of that is outside of a sales team's control. So work with your marketing team. There's an opportunity to collaborate, particularly if it's content that's on your website, that's being posted on your company's behalf on LinkedIn and that kind of thing. Work together as much as possible to make sure that you are supporting the buyer journey.
Right. And then industry events and networking opportunities. Most salespeople are people that like to connect. They like people, and this is a great way to get valuable face time. And it could be in places where it may not be an industry event, but it could be. I know I met a great lead at a client's grand opening. Believe it or not, they invited me to a grand opening. I went, and then I met someone else that wanted to do business with me. So just leverage all those opportunities.
Absolutely. And we have one more. I know this one's your one you're big on too.
Yes, consistency breeds results. Persistence pays off. And I know that customers of mine had said to me time and time again, when they were ready to buy, they came to me because I was very persistent and consistent with my messaging. And I truly believed that I could help them. And that showed throughout every time I messaged them. And pick up the phone. I mean, sometimes we're behind the screen so much that people like to talk to people. So pick up the phone and do it consistently.
Yes, great. So we have gotten a couple of questions. We will work through some of these. I know we're at the top of the hour, or the top of the hour, but we'll stay on and answer some of these questions for you. So the first one is, how can I encourage my team to try some of these new things? So many of them are stuck in old habits. So thoughts on that, Shelley? Do you have any? I know I have a thought, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Change it up. Encourage them to change it up. Bring some livelihood back into their sales, right? If we're doing the same thing over and over again and it's not breeding results, flip it over and try something new. Challenge them to do that. Give them a timeline to do it. Tell them do it for 30 days and just see what happens.
And I would add on to that, maybe add some KPIs or some metrics, some kind of measurement in conjunction with that. So one of the things that we found in our research was that very few sellers really had any kind of prospecting metrics that they were responsible for. And so hint on the bonus content for sales leaders, it might be about KPIs. So what gets measured gets done. You may even want to consider, adding a contest.
I was just going to say that, Michelle.
Yes. Yeah.
So more competitive, right?
So right.
Put it out there. Put a carrot out there. Make it a contest. Make it fun.
Yeah. And so by doing that, you start to build those habits, and they may start to see success. And as one sees success, then the other might be willing to try it, and the other one might be willing to try it. And so that kind of also has a snowball effect. So that would be my suggestion, or our suggestions kind of combined on this.
Yeah.
Let's see. Here's one. If you work in a company with a breakout of new sales versus account management, how do you recommend getting to best get account managers to share and ask for referrals when they aren't responsible for a new sales goal? So getting account managers to ask for referrals, I guess that can be passed on to the new salespeople when that's really not anything that they're held accountable for.
Right. Is there an incentive we can put? Is there some type of incentive for those account managers that if they do that, they'll get this?
Right.
That could be a way to incentivize them.
Yeah, that to me, I think is maybe best top of that's the first strategy that kind of comes to my mind is, again, some kind of incentive. It doesn't have to be anything huge either, or a significant amount of money. Depending on how your budgets are, it could be a gift card, it could be a trophy. I know
accolades.
Yes.
Accolades,
Yes. I have worked with an organization that their salespeople are not commissioned. And so to try to get them to try new things can be a challenge. And so they are competitive. And so the manager bought a trophy and just passes it around to whoever the winner is of that challenge, and will issue prospecting challenges. So that could be an idea as well. Let's see. What would you suggest prospecting strategies should be for buyers who are very early in the buying cycle, as their project has a long sales cycle and actual buying might be 24 to 36 months away? And then also the buyer may be one of many stakeholders. So long sales cycle, what are your thoughts on that?
I just feel like you still have to keep that cadence and keep being persistent.
Yeah.
Long sales cycle, sometimes sellers, we get impatient about that. We really do. But if you're in it for the long haul, if you're in it, it's a journey, right? Sales is a journey. We talk about that. So I don't think it's never, you just keeping consistent and making sure that you're doing it with a cadence. No matter how far out that sales cycle is, you still want to be top of mind when they're ready.
Yeah. I might even focus as well, with that in mind, focusing on the trust and credibility piece, right? So you may not be in a position at that point to be able to talk about your product or your service or whatever it is that you're actually selling, but building those connections sharing things that, again, like the business content, inviting them to events or trying to connect with them at industry events. I worked with an organization a few years ago, and their top salesperson, they had a longer sales cycle. They sold an engineered product that was a component of fiber optic cabling. And so their best salesperson, when we talked to him, he said that his projects were dependent on localities permitting and starting a project, let's say to lay fiber optic cable in a city. So he would monitor the public hearings for those projects, and he would go to them, and all of the initial contractors that were going to be bidding on those projects would be there. And this is way early in the process. His product would actually have to get spec'd in. So this is early in the process, but he would go as a subcontractor essentially and introduce himself. He would see everybody that might be bidding on the project. He would understand what the project was, and he would make those relationships, and none of his competitors were there.
Yeah.
So he got first dibs on those relationships. And so, that, and then he would just follow up. So to your point, Shelley, he's like, then I would just follow up, and I'd send emails, and I'd call them. I would offer to help them with the project specs and that sort of thing. So getting there early, trying to figure out what those early trigger points are, building your trust and credibility, and then the follow-up, I think, is a big one.
Michelle, you said it, first in wins, right?
Yeah,
we talk about that a lot, first in wins. I see another comment, which I'm cracking up about. Remember the old strategy of sending remote operated card to a CEO without the remote, requesting a 30-minute meeting, and bringing the remote to the meeting, right? These are would that still work today? Heck yeah, it would still work today. It's called creative drop-offs. That's what I call it, creative drop-offs. I remember back in the day sending one shoe to a prospect because I wanted to get my foot in the door, and then I would bring the other shoe. Sounds corny, but guess what? No one else was doing it.
Yeah. I think that's the interesting thing. And, again, you and I have talked about this in other times, is what's old is new. Right. So a lot of times, if everybody's sending emails, maybe try direct mail or a shoe, or a remote control card.
Or an old school handwritten note.
The old school handwritten note, that's right. So it stands out. I think my main thought there is, again, make sure that you're demonstrating creativity, but you're also advancing the trust and the credibility and that sort of thing as well. So I think anything that used to work that's not being done might be worth considering again, because you got to mix it up.
Yeah.
And then we have one more question. What are thoughts on using third-party companies for prospecting and lead generation?
So I get this a lot, because I do get these a lot, and a lot of people do, right? And sometimes I just think that they're not personable. You could tell they're generated. You could tell they're kind of canned and boxed. So, I guess it depends on the industry, and it depends on the person receiving it.
Yeah. And I think agree with you there, to the extent that you as the vendor trying to work with these third parties can have some say in the messaging, and can insist on a certain level of quality, can vet the leads. I think if you are to do it, probably worth trying it on a trial basis and seeing what, if the quality is there. If the quality is there, by all means continue. If the quality is not there, then I would discontinue. And somebody was asking about, what was the question? The question was using whether or not to use a third-party organization, third-party company for lead generation and prospecting. All right, and I think that is it for the questions. And I want to thank everybody for hanging in there with us, because we did go long, but we had some great questions, and I really do appreciate all of the engagement. Thank you, Shelley, for sharing your expertise with us today. This was so much fun for us. A lot of fun. Yeah. Again, I would encourage you all, check out the white paper That's coming your way this afternoon, your exclusive first look. And we appreciate your investment of time with us, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.